You are listening to the Bearly Audible Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Bearly Audible Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Romine, alongside Bearz. Bearz, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you, Justin. It's always a pleasure to see you, and always fun rolling out of bed to a strange new face to talk to for an hour and a half, and find out exactly what makes them interested enough for me to want to get up out of bed and chat with them. Thank you.
Yeah, and that interesting face is Alan Abrams. Alan, thank you for being here. Alan is a writer, publisher, jack of all trades. Thanks again for being here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and pleasure to meet to see the faces that belong to the words, of which I've had a chance to read a few.
Yes, Bearz posts his lyrics and poetry on his Facebook page quite often, and we enjoy reading those.
Well, my book's been out of print for about 38 years, as someone pointed out to me recently. And believe it or not, for the last 2 decades, I kept thinking to myself, I'm going to assemble something eventually. It just isn't that important to me right now, and life gets in the way, you know. And my first book was written basically at Allen Ginsberg's farm, and that is called Letters from the Doghead Hotel, published by MAF Press out of Portlandville up in New York State, upstate New York, as a matter of fact. And I don't know if it's the same way for you two, but time tends to slip away with us while we're in the creative act, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure can. Yeah.
Well, I can see that really inspired questions within you, didn't it?
Yeah, as Buddha said, you think you have time.
And it's always later than you think.
Yes, especially when you look at the clock with your eyes closed.
Exactly. It's because the
So,
digital
Alan, you are from the East Coast originally, and when you were a young lad, you decided to get on your motorcycle and head out west, and tell us kind of how you became into New Mexico.
Her name was Mary Ann.
And you knew her from high school?
No, after high school.
Okay.
We had a relationship, and I decided to pay her a visit on my way to Alaska. I was headed north to work on the pipeline, see if I could get a job on the Alaskan pipeline. And I arrived in Santa Fe, damn near broke. So I stopped off at the Honda shop, Bodie's Honda. I think it was on Guadalupe Street, not far from the Lotta Burger. And, they hired me on the spot.
Nice.
So I hung around for a while, for 6 years, actually.
So you just kind of had a diversion. Did you ever make it to Alaska?
No.
No. I spent a little bit of...
I actually gave it one more try, but I spent 5 weeks in welding school in Ohio, in Euclid, Ohio, and learned that I wasn't worth a shit as a welder. So I just kind of gave up on Alaska.
So when you got the job at the Honda shop, you had already been tooling around on motorcycles?
Oh, yeah. I'd been all over the country by that time. I'd been to the West Coast and up and down the East Coast.
And what made you stay for 6 years here? Was it her, or was it the people, the landscape, the culture?
Initially, it was the woman, of course, but I had already acquired a really high-level knack for making bad decisions, and dumped her for a flashy redhead. And
Alan, did you ever think that those bad decisions were just because you had some trauma that you didn't work through, and you were sort of triggering each other in the relationship? And if you had only worked on it, maybe things would have turned out differently?
you know, golly.
Hindsight, yeah.
That's pretty deep. Oh my gosh.
Well, it's okay that it's deep because this is the long-form interview format. It goes deeper than Tom Schneider could ever dream of. But we're not so deep that we go deep as proctologists, so fear not.
Yeah. I've written extensively about this period of time, and full of regret, full of remorse, and can we leave it at that, or
Sure.
What else is there to?
Well, I mean,
discover.
if you're happy with the place you're at now, then all of that was just kind of a building block to making you who you are.
Well, that's true, Justin. But if people don't work on their shadow work and the traumas that they've accumulated from childhood or whatever, that they're still the same person and they're still dragging that same corpse with them. And chances are they're still probably having similar experiences if they don't work through their baggage, as it were. And I'm always interested to hear how people have done that.
I mean, well, okay, let's establish the latter part of your earlier statement that, yes, I could not be more content, more happy. I'm with a woman who, maybe it's fair to say we saved each other's lives in a certain sense, emotionally anyway. But I'm not content to say that all the damage that I left behind is worth the contentment and satisfaction that I've achieved. If I had a time machine, I would, even in spite of the destination I've arrived at, if I could go back and start over, I would be a better human being.
Yeah, I can see that. There's definitely stuff in my past I'm not proud of, but it still has contributed to who I am now.
Well, it's not easy being a person either, and we in these male Earth suits, in this society especially, think we have to be, quote unquote macho, to use a term from the 70s, and brutes, as it were, and we can't express our vulnerability because society sees that in men as weakness, when in fact it's anything but weakness. It's nothing but strength. And it's nice now with the new resurgence of divine feminine and divine masculine coming about. People are talking about this more. And if we only talked about our feelings more and learned how to process them, then perhaps even realize that we're responsible for the energy that we bring to any situation, be it a relationship or a job interview or a random meeting with a stranger in line at Safeway, for instance, that we do have some control over that through our reactions and our responses. And it's not a sign of weakness to be gentle or to take your time to think about your response or to think about the other person or the tone of your voice that you're talking to someone in who's very upset because they're triggered. It may have nothing to do with us, but we never know what's going to set someone off or trigger them. The important thing is how we respond to them. And if we do it in a loving manner, and I know it's not always easy, I'm not always successful at it either, but the thing is, if we all try to keep that in our middle ground of awareness, it really does make everything, including our experience of this earthside time, much more pleasurable. And Alan, I'm very interested to hear what time frame are we talking about? Did you come out to the West Coast?
Well, okay. I made it out to Santa Barbara sometime around, I don't know, late 72, maybe. Went out there a couple of times. It was it was before I went to New Mexico, or I guess I passed through New Mexico, but just jammed right on through the first time.
What drew you to Santa Barbara?
I beg your pardon? Oh, I had an old buddy, somebody who I'd roomed with, and that there's another point of departure. If you could go back and rewrite your life, maybe that would have been a good place to hang out for a while.
Yeah.
But I was always driven to keep moving, I'm just so restless.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too. And then Bearz is as well, especially now. He kind of bounces around all over the place, and he's holed up. And where are you now? Are you in Pennsylvania still? Or are you in New York?
Well, I don't. I'm not necessarily a nomad by nature. About 7 years ago, I met this amazing person on Craigslist, of all things, believe it or not. I was out in Oregon. I went out there to help put the fires out. And I decided to come back to the East Coast to see my elderly parents. And I've been in touch with them, and we have been estranged for a while. But I thought they're getting older, and I should do the responsible thing, check in with them, see how they're doing. And I come from a very toxic family, by the way. They don't know how to express themselves emotionally. They're very emotionally manipulative, and they're very reactionary. And they tend to overstate things, make things larger than what they are. Long story short was, according to them, my brother wasn't helping them with daily chores or whatever it was they needed help with in life. So I thought, okay, I'll go back to New York State and help them, get them situated and settled and see what I can do for them. But on the way across America, somewheres over middle America, I wrote an ad for Craigslist because I'm not enlightened enough by any stretch of the imagination to spend 24 hours with my parents. So I needed someone to have coffee with and to chat with and just get out and socialize with. And one night after having Thanksgiving dinner at my brother's house, and I don't know who cooked that meal, whether it was him or his wife, but their cooking skills hopefully have improved in the interim because I was up all night with food poisoning. So to distract myself from throwing up, I opened up my laptop, went into my email and looked at my email, and there was a response from a gorgeous yoga instructor who, after a little conversation, turned out that she was super materialistic, and that's fine if that's her trip, wasn't mine. And another email said, I'm a writer too, so I opened up that one. That was Panda Bears. So I made contact with Panda Bear, and it was that moment that this beautiful relationship started, and it was the beginning of a 6.5-year odyssey of travel and living in Oregon and just experiencing the amazing, majestic magic that Oregon is and its people. We lived out there for a long time. And long story short, we came back to the East Coast about 1.5 years ago. And we both have had some childhood trauma that we had to work on and process. So we sort of split up, separated physically, as twin flames often do, to work on themselves. And in retrospect, I mean, there's a whole lot of travel in that 1.5 years that I've been separated from her too. Down in Virginia, meeting some amazing people. It was a year of eat, love, and pray, and a whole lot of magic and a whole lot of exploration and discovery that I want to get to at some point and process, whether I write poetry about it or do some journal entries or do a standalone video. But long story short is, Panda and I separated to work on our individual baggage. And at the time I met her, I thought, oh yeah, I'm all together. I've got all of my fragments of trauma worked out, and I'm really good to go, And well, you are until you meet your twin flame, because they're the ones that mirror back to you everything that's not healed, and you do the same thing for them. But she is the most amazing teacher and person I have ever met in my entire life. Her heart and her love just sort of cracked me open finally.
Yeah.
And before
No,
that,
that's very clear from your poetry. I was just reading a piece. I think it was in the last 24 hours you posted something about Panda.
And before that, I was like dealing with like some self-sabotage issues and self-defensiveness. Well, I've got all that worked out and squared away, lovingly sort of put it to rest, as it were, by going back and having really long talks with my parents. And my father passed away in June of last year. He had advanced melanoma and aggressive melanoma. He was 93. And the cat was just ready to go. He was one of these dudes that after World War II, he was one of his missions was to spy on the Russians. So that's what he did. He spied on the Russian occupied territory of Germany at that point. So he's always been a real hardy sort of mountain kind of guy, can't do anything. So for him to succumb to chronic advanced melanoma and watch him suffer was quite an ordeal. But he did it in such a way that it was a gift to the whole family. And it made me realize at that point that, being vulnerable is the strength that we all need. And Panda taught me that too. She's like, if you're going to do something, just be all in it, man. Just be all in 100%. And in many ways, Panda has become my new power animal. I mean, I've always seen the polar bear as my power animal, or some specimen of the bear family, certainly. And I can go and talk about that from hanging out with Sun Bear at Allen Ginsberg's farm in upstate New York. But there's just too many things to talk about, really, and to rein it in and bring it back home. That's really what brought me back to the East Coast, was coming back to see my parents. And that's how I made that connection with Panda Bear that wonderful, beautiful night. And it's really, duality is really incredible. Here I am puking my guts up from a poorly cooked Thanksgiving meal at my brother's house to this beautiful experience happening at the same time, this connection with this beautiful soul, And it's wonderful and beautiful how in a nanosecond our lives can just take that detour, and that divine new path opens up for us. And we shouldn't fear it in our hearts, gentlemen. If we feel called to do that, follow your intuition, do it from your highest good and from their highest good. And I do believe the results will always be a positive one for you all. Maybe perhaps not easy, but at the end of the journey are these incredible golden nuggets that complete yourself that you couldn't have otherwise accessed, Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen.
And they say nothing worth doing is easy.
Yeah.
So, it's you have to work. You have to work. You can't really just skate by life without, having not put in the work.
That's right. And life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you. And we all signed up for this journey, man, we all signed up to come back to this planet to figure it out and get it right, hopefully, each and every time we arrive back here or find ourselves back planet side. And ultimately, in the final analysis, what's really important is, did you do it with love? What was your intent? Is the situation or is the person better than when you found them? How did you increase the good? What did you bring to the party? What did you bring to the table? And if you brought even a modicum of positivity and some self-awareness to it, it can't help but be a better place. And I really do believe that we're all on this journey to remember and to discover who we are, not to get lost in this Maya sort of improv masquerade ball. And ultimately, in the final analysis, quantum physics even shows that we're all one, we're all quantumly entangled. Why are we taking this fear around and afraid of this or that? Because the government or the news cycle tells us to be afraid of a new boogeyman that we should bang the war drums for and get all riled up and be so uptight and self-contemptuous that we're willing to sacrifice our loved ones for more false flags and fictitious wars. And who does that benefit, after all? It doesn't benefit the planet. We're not here to run around and commit war every time we have a disagreement or need to pump up the economy. We're here to love, man. We're here to find out what it is that prevents each and every one of us from becoming a loving human being. And once we discover that, wars will become obsolete. And I think anyone who even participates or calls for another act of aggression on this planet is immediately a criminal of humankind. This planet doesn't need any more war. We got to squelch the wars that are in our hearts. We have to find out what it is within each and every one of us that kind of thinks, oh yeah, that's the way to solve something, violence. Let's just go out and get in a fist fight or some sort of global thermal nuclear exchange because what? Are we really on this planet to demonstrate how stupid the species can be, or are we on this planet to demonstrate that we can rise above it and be loving and make life better for everyone? It's not some utopian dream. If there's a will and a desire, we can make it happen. If there's a will and desire to go to war, there can be the will and desire for the opposite as well. As they say, it's as easy to be a genius as it is to be the opposite. It's all about choice.
Yeah, I appreciate your stance in that, and I hope people would come to their senses, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, that's the first thing. We have to see it happen, and we have to see it happening within us, and it begins right at home within us, how we respond to people that we might have a conflict with or a difference of opinion. We don't have to meet their energy in kind. In fact, we can just let their energy kind of pass over us and respond to them at a later point, or just shake your head and say, well, that may be your reality, but it's not mine, It's
Sure.
just a matter of learning to respond in a new and different way. Instead of meeting fire with fire, meet it with some water. In some cases, put it out completely, by your loving and fully present attitude. I mean, you can sort of use language in the way that Aikido practitioners use their opponent's energy.
So, Alan, yesterday you and I got to talk a little bit, and I was asking you about your writing and how you hadn't previously considered yourself much of a writer, and that your writing was more of a healing thing for you to kind of go through. Can you kind of explain that again, how you got into writing?
I got into writing, I guess, in the 9th grade, and I'm sitting here with a book I published called The Teacher's Mind Travels by B.B. Riefner, Bernard B. Riefner. And bless his heart, he's turning 97 next week. He was always an acquaintance, but he's really become a friend. And you talk about going back to care for your parents, your aged parents.
Yeah.
I kind of have a father-son relationship with this guy now. I lost my father when I was barely a young man. So Riefner would have us write every day, just little essays, on any topic. Maybe it was a reading he assigned or something. And I enjoyed it. And I was a dorky kid, geeky, eyeglasses, skinny. And he would tease anybody. He was hell on the women, on the girls. Anyway, he got me excited about writing, and I went on through the rest of my high school education, a pretty good writer, in terms of book reports and essays and such. But then I left it behind. I just totally left it behind. I had I had the promise of good grades, and could have gone into law. I could have gone into medicine. I had the smarts to do anything professionally, but I didn't want that life. I went to work at the local Volkswagen garage, and I loved it. I got into motorcycle mechanics. I became a well-trained, a good BMW motorcycle mechanic, a good Honda mechanic, and I was very happy in that career. So one thing led to another. I got into construction, and I loved that even more than I loved mechanics. Plus, it was a little cleaner. When you're a mechanic, you get this grease impacted into your knuckles, and you can't wash it out at the end of the day. You're choking on exhaust fumes, using solvents that even back 50 years ago I knew were carcinogenic. And construction, being outdoors, and you're talking about the function of machismo in our lives, and this was my way of being machismo. I was not a fighter. I wasn't a warrior. I didn't serve in the Army or Marines or anything. And I didn't like confrontation between people, but this was a way of expressing manhood that was fulfilling. But, your body gets beaten up by construction, and by the time I was 40, I didn't feel like humping 2x12s anymore. And started, at various times I started my own company. For 4 years, I worked for a series of developers, which was a different way, a different approach to construction. This was management. I was a assistant and then a full superintendent. So you learn about the process. You learn about project management, and I became a very good project manager. But along the way, I fell a third time in love, and each love deeper and deeper. I fell in love with design, with architecture, and studied architecture on my own. Studied the plans of the architects I worked for, and began designing my own projects. Got involved in a professional association, and each step of the way enriching the experience. But during that period of time, I did a little bit of writing. I did some book reports for the professional association, and wrote a column for the local newspaper, and just fiddle farting around. And then I don't know. I don't ever remember writing something for its own sake. Although my cousin gave me a poem that I had written. She gave me a copy. I'll tell you how old it was, or how far back it goes. It was printed out on a dot matrix printer, so that dates it. And it's like, okay, I was even into it, and I forgot I was into it, But, talk about your bad choices. I got into yet another marriage, and at this time I was really trying to go straight. I was really trying to be part of my family again. I readopted a daughter I'd abandoned when I was a kid, basically, and worked my ass off, even quit smoking pot at some point. But that marriage went south, and that's when I really started writing. And I started traveling, and I would just write little travelogues at first, and then I started writing memoirs, and then fictionalized memoirs, and the next thing I know, I'm writing more seriously.
And it started kind of as a therapeutic method too, right?
Well, if you look at these love affairs of motorcycles, of banging nails, of architecture, this was yet another love affair.
It sounds like, Alan, that banging nails and architecture and mechanics is somewhat almost like trying to force one's will up on the natural flow of things. Did you feel that maybe you were banging your head against life and you just found yourself that, well, by golly, life isn't bending to my will? And at some point, did you ever think of, the expression of just get in the flow, to let life carry you to where you need to go? Did you ever have that experience?
I'm sorry, could you clarify that, please?
Did you ever find at any point in your life that it was easier to get into the flow of life as opposed to try to force your will upon life to bend in the direction you want it to go in?
No, I never looked at it intellectually like that. I was more, just immersed in these experiences. Mm-hmm. It wasn't. I never guided my life, by the North Star. It was always what's around the corner, and
well, that's a cool way to do it too, because it's very Zen-like. It's like just dealing with what is as life sort of pops up for you, dealing with the moment.
And you could even look at where I'm at this very moment, and I'm having a hard time writing anymore. I really am.
Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I am involved in publishing now, and I have 2 manuscripts I'm working on.
Alan, the French have a saying: to work up an appetite, you have to eat. So just go ahead and write and scribble and whatever it is that sort of primes your pump and to get the energy flowing again. It's still in there. It's still within you. You're still an expressive, being. So don't give up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm still doing important work. This is really privileged information, but I'm working with a merger on this publishing company that I launched in July. And it was always in the back of my mind to have a bigger purpose for this publishing company. And I'm talking to a nonprofit that does some publishing, but is involved in so many other things that they need help that I can provide, with production, and again, although I don't have real strategic vision, I have, project management skills that translate from building a house to putting out a book.
And you've got a good heart too, and you'll make those decisions from the heart for what's best, not only for the artist but for the company too. I feel you're a good human being. And are you a Cancerian by chance?
A who?
A Cancerian. When's your birthday?
Oh. Oh man. You should read one of my stories.
Well, I would have if anyone ever got me. In fact, I'm still waiting for Bill's book to come through.
No, I'm a cusp, Leo Virgo cusp.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that's a pretty fucked combination.
I don't know, because it makes you very sensitive and also rather sort of business savvy as well, but also with a heart. So I think it's a really beautiful combination.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the title of one of the little books I published, and
cool.
Comes from the title of a story I wrote about those days, which I described in New Mexico. So.
Do you know Lawrence Ferlinghetti offered me a book deal? We were we found ourselves in this kitchen in upstate New York after his poetry reading, drinking copious amounts of red wine. And it was me, Charlie Plymell, Janine Palmy Vega. We went up to Geneseo because, obviously they were all acquainted and they were friends of mine. And this was about, I met Ferlinghetti when he was a young man of 80 years old.
Ah.
Did you ever meet him?
No.
Yeah.
I'm kind of outside of that world.
Yeah, but at some point you get to be so outside that you're included in it,
Yeah.
So what new projects do you have coming up, Alan?
So, 2 local poets. One I would call, man. Okay, let's not talk about her. One poet has just given me a manuscript, 120 typewritten pages, and it is otherworldly. It really to get into reading it and appreciating it is like a psychedelic experience almost. It's not the way I write at all. It's so opposite the way I write. I'm very prosaic, even in my poetry. And this woman is, making words cast a spell. So I still can see that there's inconsistencies, things that need to be either eliminated or refined. So I'm really looking forward to working with this woman. I've known her for several years. And even just to meet her is kind of this ethereal experience. But so you ask what I'm working on. I'm working on this manuscript, and she may say, no, it's exactly the way I want, just publish it, which would be, in a way, a great relief. But I want to see if I can, I want to understand her manuscript better. That's what I want.
And so,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yesterday you and I were talking, Alan, about you starting your printing, publishing, Sligo Creek Publishing, and you told me it started as a mistake.
Yeah, it was just out of frustration, trying to get my own chapbook published for several years, and rejection after rejection. So I said, God damn it, I'm just going to publish the damn thing myself, which entailed, I didn't want to go to Amazon. So I started assembling all the pieces of production of, everything from acquiring ISBN numbers to barcodes to relationship with Ingram Spark, which is the on-demand publishing behemoth. And in order to create book covers, you need a very sophisticated Adobe design product, and I had to learn that. And anyway, so I go through this process. I crank out the book, and then some guy calls and said, "Hey, we want to publish your chapbook." And fuck me. So anyway, here I have the apparatus, and I crank out another one of my own books, and the next thing I know, I'm publishing stuff like Bill's book and other local poets.
Yeah.
Well, that's good that you keep them publishing alive, especially small presses. Small presses are the backbone of America, and they're going to even be more so. And there's going to be a resurgence of them, I firmly believe, in the next 4.5 years.
Yeah. Well, I hope that's true. I hope we continue to have the freedom to publish.
Well, what freedom are you afraid of losing? I mean, it's not like we're in danger of losing any of our freedoms at the moment, especially the Second Amendment. If we just
I feel threatened. I feel very threatened.
By what? What do you feel threatened by?
The ruthlessness and lack of respect for law and order of the Trump administration, of the propensity for violence, the propensity for repression.
While all
the ingredients are there, I'm a bit of a historian.
Well, while all that exists, I mean, did you also feel that way when Nixon was in office? And I'm sure you still wrote poetry when Nixon was in office.
Back in the Nixon days, it was personal. It was all about Vietnam. I come from a family of Nixon haters. My parents hated Nixon for when he was Eisenhower's VP. Probably before that. Let me put it this way. If my father came back to life, and if I could spend 5 minutes with my father again, the first thing I would say is, Dad, Nixon resigned.
Yeah, I didn't live through the Nixon administration. a bit younger. But I do historically know about his presidency and some of the bad choices he made and the people around him made. And yeah, I could see where you're afraid that our freedoms may get taken away, but they aren't going to stop you from writing.
Exactly. And always remember that the Chinese have a word, wu wei. It essentially translates to, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. And the opportunity is, how do we choose to respond? So keep enacting your freedom of speech. Keep saying your truth. Speak your truth. We don't have we don't have to meet fear with fear.
Yeah. No,
and whatever you
I didn't say. Okay, I'm fearful in the sense that I'm apprehensive, but if push comes to shove, I will not be silent.
There you go, and that's your opportunity to overcome fear. Let it just transcend it. Let it wash through you, man.
Yeah. Well, let me distinguish between fearfulness as apprehensiveness and fearfulness as fearfulness that's an apprehension, and fear that is paralyzing.
Yes, don't become paralyzed by it. Meet it with creativity.
I have a quick little story I'd like to tell, kind of about censorship and stuff. A future guest of ours is a man by the name of Rahim El-Haj, and he is an Iraqi oud player, and he has ties here into New Mexico. Excuse me. We're going to get him on the podcast. He's just kind of super busy right now, but he was being censored in Iraq by Saddam, and he refused to write any Saddam Hussein pro lyrics or music. And so he basically had a price on his head, and he defected from there and went to Jordan and ended up in the American embassy, and they said that they would help him get to the United States. And they said they were going to set him up with a gig playing music, and he got to Albuquerque, and the job he showed up to was a McDonald's.
Oh, man.
And somewhere the lines kind of got crossed, and he thought he was going to be playing music at a restaurant, and instead they were wanting him to cook burgers in the back. And so that kind of inspired him to do it himself. And so I think he rented out, I think it was Pope Joy Hall at the University of New Mexico. He rented it out himself, made flyers, went all around Albuquerque handing out flyers and putting them up on telephone poles and all over the place. And I think that he actually sold out the show, and nobody had ever heard of him. Most people don't know what an oud is, which is an ancient kind of guitar. And from there, he went and started recording. I believe he recorded with Columbia, and he was nominated for a bunch of Grammys. He may have even won a couple. But was it American Folkways or Columbia? I can't remember which one it was where he got a recording deal. And now he's busy. He's recorded with orchestras and other musicians and stuff like that. And so he took that censorship and said, "You're not going to silence me. and ran with it. And look at him now.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I look forward to having him on the podcast someday soon. I had interviewed him years ago for a magazine, and that's kind of how I got to know him a little bit. But actually, it was Bill Nevins that introduced us. Bill knows him from here.
Bill knows everybody in the universe.
He does know everybody, yeah. So that's kind of how I got to know Rahim El-Haj, and I think his story is very inspiring.
You know what's interesting? Last night I proposed a sort of a comical idea to Bill. I was talking to Bill, and I'm like, Bill, what if we did a poetry mockumentary about this beat poet who really couldn't find a name in the beat world, but he was an amazing Hallmark greeting card, prolific prose writer, and we could have, interviews by the Beatles saying how they were more impressed by this Hallmark cat than they were Elvis, and have even some of Dylan Thomas's relatives come on and be like, yeah, Dylan was really inspired by those Hallmark greeting cards when he was a kid. Move over the Ruddles and Spinal Tap, right? So Justin, if you're into doing something of that nature, let me know. It'd be fun.
It does sound fun. Yeah. We could definitely work on a manuscript for that. Alan, I was curious. Your publishing company, Sligo Creek Publishing, where did that title come from? Is that in reference to Sligo, Ireland?
No, not directly. I mean, the creek was named for County Sligo, but Sligo Creek is down the hill from where I live.
Okay.
And,
have you ever noticed there aren't very many imaginative and original street or place names in America? No matter what town you go to, there's a First, Second, and Third Street. There's a West Main Street. And, the list goes on. I don't care what town I'm in, whether it's Sayre, Pennsylvania, or Roseburg, Oregon, man. Some of the street names are just identical, and it makes you wonder, were they riding the ox cart out there going, I can't wait to get out there so I can name Third Street,
Yeah, I got to get there first so I can name it Third Street.
So why do you think why don't we use our imagination more when it comes to naming things? Why are we dragging these old corpses around and tossing them in new geographic areas, do you think?
I don't know, probably sheer laziness.
Alan, what's your opinion on it?
DC has some pretty good street names. The north-south streets are numerical, but the avenues, the east-west streets, they begin with the first alphabet closest to the capital is single-syllable names, and then you move up the next 26 blocks are two-syllable names and three-syllable names, and they're named for personages of the 19th century: Tuckerman, Madison, Oglethorpe, Longfellow.
Yeah.
And then the last alphabet, where they were getting up into three, I forget how many syllables, but then they start going aspen, butternut, cedar,
Hey, Alan, did you ever get down to Floyd, Virginia?
No, I'm sorry.
It's just a fantastic creative place. I spent a lovely year there once, down in an incredible magical holler, and the people are just some of the most interesting and sweetest and kindest and loving and most creative people on earth. Lots of musicians there, some really good food there.
Yeah, I've been there.
You've been to Floyd?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. What are some of your memories of Floyd?
Let's see, did you know Joe Klockner?
No, I didn't.
He hung out there. I think he still has a property not far from there. anyway, neither here nor there.
And I also wanted to ask you about your philosophy of architectural design. Are there any parallels between that and your later creative life, between, say, creating and designing a lovely structure? Do you ever see parallels between that and your poetry or any of your current endeavors?
Oh, yeah. The comparisons abound, of, what is the most integral part of architecture is the nail or the rivet, in other words, like the letters of the alphabet, and then you have assemblies of studs and plywood. They're like sentences, and then the building itself is a verse with beginning and an end, a foundation and a roof. I mean, you can take that trope and run with it all day long. But I look back at the very first house I ever designed, which I just did a little teeny little doodle on the flyleaf of a book called The Owner Built Home, which is a story in itself. But I had not a small piece, it was like 8 or 10 acres in the Espanola Valley. I pitched a tent and had a lantern, and I did the little sketch of a floor plan and called the backhoe. The backhoe was coming out that morning. I went out and literally drew life scale, full scale, the outline of the house on the ground and started building. And I wasn't really too sure what it was going to look like, or, so I just started building it. It was more or less freeform, curved walls.
Oh, cool.
Adobe, timber ceiling, stone floor. It was the best house I ever designed. I could never do it again. It was, to tell you the sequence of what I did. I built the house more or less myself. I had a little bit of help getting the timbers up on the roof. And then I got nervous. This is out in Rio Arriba County, which is like as far away from the established United States as you can get, the lower 48. And I started getting a little bit nervous about owning a house on a piece of property for which there was absolutely no record, no legal record of it, or no civil record. So I drew the most crude floor plan and cross section, and I took it up to Tierra Amarilla and got a building permit. And this is after I'm living in the house. And the inspector came out and, just kind of threw his hands up, approved
Nice.
the construction.
Well, that's a great story.
It really is the most marvelous experience in the universe. It's like just inventing it as you go.
I can certainly
Is the house still there?
I beg your pardon?
Is the house still there?
Oh, it's been added on to like 3 or 4 times.
Wow. Oh, that's great.
Do you visit it when you come to New Mexico?
I visited, the last time I had visited the house itself was maybe 12, 15 years ago, because I knew the neighbor. Now, you don't want to go down a dirt road, across a cattle guard, down another dirt road.
Right.
Yeah.
When people don't know you.
Right.
Did that inspire you to write a lot of poetry back then when you were building the house? And also, it sounds
it was inconceivable. It wasn't even on my radar. It was nowhere near my radar. I didn't even have the radar to detect it.
A few chapters ago, when I was much younger, I specialized in mid-century moderns. In fact, one of my great loves, I got to the point where people would call me to come in and fix other people's debacles and claims that they had skills which they clearly didn't. And I got to live in this one incredible mid-century modern for about a year and a half. And I told the owners, it's going to take about that long for me to finish it. I'm going to move into it. They're like, oh, that's great, because we'll have someone inhabit in the house, It was one of those old mid-century moderns with the intercoms. Do you remember that?
Sure.
It had an intercom throughout the whole house. And at a point, it was like living in a living, breathing sculpture. The house had its own sort of spirit to it.
Yeah.
Did you ever experience that?
I live in a mid-century modern building. It really would be quite at home, on the river in Chicago. It's a little smaller in scale than a Chicago high-rise, but it's an amazing piece of architecture that's in the middle of suburbia. Just
nice.
An accident of zoning and whatever crazy stuff was going on in 1965.
Oh, that's perfect, though.
But it's not a natural form for me. I've remodeled this apartment like 5 times. It's kind of a Taliesin, if you will.
Nice.
But yeah, there's tension. There's a tension between the angularity, the necessary angularity of architecture and the organic form that you find in Adobe construction and primitive construction, from teepees to igloos to yurts. Things are soft and circular, and
nice.
As soon as you work in scale, things get hard-edged and machine-made and banged together.
Well, soft and circular is more of a natural organic form and shape anyways.
Yeah.
And I think it appeals to us more
strong and stable too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you ever get involved in building Earth ships?
No, but I don't know if you know the Dobson House, and
it's famous.
Yeah. Well, when I ran off with this woman I'm living with now for the past 20 years, I took her to the Dobson House. We hung out there for a little while. But I've been involved in straw bale construction and Adobe construction. That's really where my heart lies. And I got tired. I really got tired of construction and got tired of working for people who were so materialistic.
Yeah.
That I just couldn't stand it. But if somebody came to me and said, let's build a straw bale, God damn, I would jump on it. If somebody wanted an Adobe house here in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., I would be on it tomorrow.
Well, the insulation value of a straw house is phenomenal. There's no reason we shouldn't use more of it.
There are easier and cheaper ways to accomplish the same efficiency, but nothing is as beautiful.
Yeah, but easier and cheaper also implies there's a certain amount of synthetic building materials being used.
Yeah.
And who needs the off gas, and why would you subject yourself to living in a gas chamber essentially of a new house, you know?
Yeah. Believe me, I've studied this. I was trained in passive house design. I've actually designed a passive house. So, you know, I'm well schooled in the European approach to building a healthy indoor environment. And
were you ever inspired by Eric Sloane's series of books?
by who?
Eric Sloane. You know, the guy who was up in New England and diagrammed all those beautiful bridges and old house construction of the 1800s.
Huh.
If you're not familiar with him, go ahead and check him out, and I'd be interested to hear what your opinion is on Eric Sloane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who are some of your influences, not only architectural speaking, but perhaps design that we might not know about, or that we might be surprised to hear that, you know, oh, you're into Karl Lagerfeld and they've inspired you to do this or that, you know?
Gosh. I don't know. I guess you could say, in terms of architecture, Bart Prince. I've worked on a couple of his houses in White Rock, New Mexico. Bart Prince was a student of Bruce Goff, who was a student of the master. So you could say I'm like fourth generation student of Frank Lloyd Wright in that sense.
Nice. I bet you were inspired by Arco Santi, weren't you?
By who?
Arco Santi, Paolo Soleri's, his wonderful construction.
Some awareness of him, half a lifetime ago or 3/4 of a lifetime ago.
But he also uses the same sort of organic shapes that we've been talking about in his construction. Yeah. He was an immigrant from Italy, of course, you know. Yeah. Where do you see the future?
Alan?
Where do you see the future of, like, architectural design going? Do you think we're going back to more organic sort of shapes, or do you just foresee America in tiny houses?
We're building shit that, with crappier materials. America culturally is deader than dead. You know, if there's anything that's going to arise, it's going to be, from the Arab culture or the Asian culture. It's not going to come from the American culture anymore.
Why do you feel American culture is dead and that it's shit for?
Because we're greedy materialists with no attention span.
What about the artists out there, maybe out in middle of Wisconsin, who aren't connected to the internet, just doing their own thing? I mean, there are pockets of enclaves of very creative individuals.
Sure, there's that enclave where the Dobson House is, although I'm sure that's like becoming the next thing you know, they'll start paving the roads back there.
Do you think it's our responsibility as older artists to help the younger ones, to help guide them, or at least make ourselves accessible if they want to come talk to us?
Yeah. Okay. Here's a project that we've only whispered about, but
I've heard those whispers, by the way.
There's a guy I know from the North Shore of Chicago, and he's working with these kids who came over from Afghanistan. They were evacuated with their families when the U.S. pulled the military out of Afghanistan, and helping them learn English. And so I pitched this to him to, in order to help them learn, to have them write poetry and
Nice.
put together an anthology.
Oh, that's great. So, where is that project at the moment?
It needs stimulation. I need to prod him again. And I'll be out in that neck of the woods in February, so I'll get in touch with him again.
Once when I was poet in residence up in Snaggy Mountain, I was driving to the class and I was thinking, what can I do that's new for these people? So when I arrived, the classroom was in this beautiful converted barn. I told the students, who were anywhere from like 22 to 75, I'm like, take the next hour, go out onto the property, 200 acres, go out onto the property, find things that are meaningful to you, that speak to you, whether it's a pine cone or a beautiful rock or a beer can, whatever it is. I'm going to give you an hour to go out and collect items and bring them back in. I'm going to have you create poetry from those items. We're not going to use words or an alphabet of established language. We're going to use feeling. And they did. They all went out and they brought them back in and they assembled them on, either their plywood or their masonite. And they were these incredible, random sort of discoveries, these found objects, poetry and found objects. And each one of them, it was the longest poetry class probably that I was ever part of as well, or facilitated. I never thought I taught, I facilitated. I like to think of myself as a conduit for creativity and helping bring it out in others and allowing it to flow, or in some cases freeing it up. Do you ever think about objects as poetry, or using it as another language to communicate or express whatever it is that perhaps your spirit couldn't express in the English language?
Well, again, like I said before, I'm a very prosaic writer, and I'm a storyteller. But what you're describing is I'll give her a name. The poet whose manuscript I'm working on, who is a spellcaster. What you're describing, these found objects and these some natural, some man-made objects. This is this woman's apartment, man.
Wow.
Your photography, her assemblages of lacy things, spiderwebby things, and luminous things, and smooth things. That's where she's coming from. So
it sounds like there's a book there for you to put together. And my students basically created these incredible, spontaneous, mystical, what really wound up being large Joseph Cornell boxes, magic boxes almost, of these objects.
Yeah.
I would
Alan,
love to,
I want to.
I just want to say I would love to see your friend's work at some point.
Yeah. Well, you'll see it between covers, this spring.
Nice. Looking forward to it, man.
Alan, thank you for spending the past hour with us, and thank you for keeping independent publishing alive. It's great that people are able to go and be able to read somebody's work that otherwise isn't going to be largely printed.
Yeah.
I think the independent press is very valuable, specifically for the artists. It makes them feel validated in what they do, and they're able to share their stories with others.
Well, it's keeping freedom of speech alive, and that's the essential thing, man. These independent presses are, like I said, the backbone and the spirit of American freedom of speech, and we must honor the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because without those, we have nothing. absolutely zero. We have to support those people that honor and serve and protect that as well. And we're
Absolutely,
grateful that there are people serving and protecting the Constitution. Thank you, folks.
Yeah. And Alan, thank you again for being here. It's been a very enlightening conversation we've had. You have had such a crazy life, and you've kind of been all over the place, and I appreciate your writing as well. I quite enjoyed It Was in the Stars. And I also have your book of poetry as well, and I'm slowly getting through that.
And Alan, I appreciate Bill Evans, I think, as much as you do. He's one of my favorite musicians.
Amen to that.
Yeah, so you can check out the titles on Alan's publishing company is Sligo Creek Publishing. You can look at the titles on there. Go to his website, support the artist. Bill Nevins is on there. 2 of Alan's books, and so definitely check out Sligo Creek Publishing. And Alan, thanks again for being here. You've been listening to the Bearly Audible Podcast. Come back next week.